The morning sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my oceanfront condo, casting golden light across the Italian marble floors. I stood in my gourmet kitchen, the one with the Viking range and the custom cabinetry that I'd designed myself, sipping coffee from a porcelain cup while watching the waves crash against the shore 20 stories below. At 67 years old, I had finally arrived at a place of peace. A place I had built with my own 2 hands, my own sweat, my own determination. And then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friend Patricia wasn't due for our lunch date until tomorrow, and the building concierge always called before sending visitors up. I set down my coffee cup and walked across the living room, past the baby grand piano I'd always dreamed of owning, past the original artwork I'd collected over the years, past the photographs of places I'd traveled to since my life changed. When I opened the door, my heart stopped. Standing in my hallway were 2 people I hadn't seen in 15 years. My daughter, Melissa, and her husband, Craig. They looked older, of course. Melissa had gray streaks in her hair now, and Craig's face had grown jowly, his expensive suit straining at the buttons. But what struck me most was their expressions, the way their eyes darted past me into my home, scanning the furniture, the art, the view, the way Melissa's mouth fell open just slightly when she saw the crystal chandelier hanging in my foyer. I said nothing. I simply stood there, one hand on the door, waiting. Melissa spoke first. Her voice was tentative, nothing like the cold, dismissive tone I remembered from our last conversation. "Mom," she said. "Mom, you look wonderful." I still said nothing. Craig cleared his throat. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, using my maiden name that I'd reclaimed after my husband died. "We were hoping we could come in and talk. We've been trying to find you for months." 15 years, I said. My voice was calm, steady. 15 years of silence, and now you've been trying to find me for months. How interesting. Melissa's eyes welled up with tears. "Mom, please. Can we just come in? There's so much I need to explain." I looked at my daughter. I looked at the man who had systematically dismantled my relationship with her, and against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let them enter. They walked into my living room like they were entering a museum, their heads swiveling to take in every detail. The Bose sound system, the 75-inch television mounted above the fireplace, the terrace with its outdoor kitchen and infinity-edge hot tub. I watched Craig's face as he calculated the worth of everything he saw, and I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. "Please," I said, gesturing to the sectional sofa. "Sit down." They sat. I remained standing. "This is quite a place," Craig said, attempting a smile. "You've done very well for yourself." "I have," I agreed. "No thanks to either of you." Melissa flinched. "Mom, that's not fair." "Isn't it?" I asked. "Tell me, Melissa, what exactly is fair about what happened between us? What is fair about a daughter telling her mother that she's dead to her? What is fair about being uninvited from my own grandchildren's lives? Let me explain everything from the beginning. Let me tell you how I went from being a devoted mother and grandmother to a woman erased from her own family's existence. Let me tell you about the 15 years I spent rebuilding myself from nothing while my daughter pretended I didn't exist. I was 52 years old when my husband Richard died of a heart attack. We had been married for 31 years. He was a good man. A hard-working man, a high school history teacher who coached the baseball team and never missed one of Melissa's school events. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We had a nice house in suburban Ohio, 2 cars, and enough saved for retirement. I worked as a registered nurse at the local hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts in the cardiac unit. Melissa was our only child. Our miracle baby, we called her, because we'd tried for years before she came along. We gave her everything we could. Dance lessons, summer camps, a car for her 16th birthday. When she got into Ohio State, we took out a second mortgage on our house to pay for her tuition because we didn't want her to graduate with debt. She met Craig during her junior year. He was a business major, the son of a wealthy family from Cleveland. His father owned a chain of car dealerships, and Craig had grown up with everything handed to him. I didn't like him from the start. There was something about the way he looked at people, like he was always assessing their value, always calculating what they could do for him. But Melissa was in love. And when your child is in love, you bite your tongue, you smile, you welcome this person into your family, even when every instinct tells you something is wrong. They got married a year after graduation, a lavish wedding that Craig's parents paid for. Richard and I sat in the second row, behind Craig's family, because that was where we were told to sit. During the reception, Craig's mother made a comment about how nice it was that the bride's family could make it, her tone implying that we were somehow lesser than them. Richard squeezed my hand under the table, and I swallowed my pride for my daughter's sake. The first few years were fine. Melissa and Craig lived in Columbus, close enough that I could visit on weekends. When my grandson Tyler was born, I was there in the delivery room, holding my daughter's hand. When my granddaughter Emma came along 2 years later, I helped out for the first month, cooking meals and doing laundry while Melissa recovered. But things started to change after Richard died. I was devastated, of course. 31 years with someone, and then suddenly they're gone. The house felt too big, too empty. I threw myself into work to cope, picking up extra shifts at the hospital. Melissa called every few days at first, checking on me, making sure I was eating. Then Craig got a promotion. They moved to Chicago, 4 hours away. The calls became less frequent. The visits became rare. I tried to stay connected. I sent birthday cards and Christmas presents. I called every Sunday evening to talk to the grandchildren. But more often than not, I got voicemail. When I did reach Melissa, the conversations were short, distracted. She always had somewhere to be, something to do. About a year after Richard died, I decided to visit Chicago for Tyler's 5th birthday. I didn't ask permission. I just booked a flight and a hotel room, planning to surprise them. I called Melissa the day before to let her know I was coming. The silence on the other end of the phone told me everything I needed to know. "Mom," she finally said, "this isn't a good time." "It's your son's birthday," I said. "Your son, my grandson, how is that not a good time?" I heard her sigh. I heard Craig's voice in the background, asking who was on the phone. Then Melissa said something that I will never forget as long as I live. She said, "Craig thinks it would be better if you didn't come." I asked her what that meant. I asked her why my son-in-law was making decisions about whether I could see my own grandchildren. I asked her what was happening to us, and she said, "Craig thinks you're a bad influence on the kids." A bad influence. Me. The woman who had worked double shifts to put her through college. The woman who had sat up with her through chickenpox and heartbreak and bad grades. The woman who had never asked for anything in return except to be part of her life. I asked what I had done to be called a bad influence. I asked for one example, one instance where I had behaved inappropriately around my grandchildren. Melissa couldn't give me one. Because there wasn't one. It's complicated, Mom," she said. "Craig has certain ideas about family, about boundaries. He thinks the kids are getting confused with too many people involved in their lives." Too many people? I was their grandmother, their only living grandparent, since Richard was gone and Craig's parents had passed away years before. How was one grandmother too many people? But I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I thought if I just gave them space, gave Craig whatever he thought he needed, things would go back to normal. I canceled my flight. I sent Tyler's present by mail. And I waited. The calls became even less frequent. Once a month, then every few months, then only on holidays. And even then, the conversations were stilted and awkward, with Craig hovering in the background like a prison guard. 2 years after Richard died, Melissa called me on Christmas Eve. I was so happy to hear from her that I didn't notice at first how strained her voice sounded. "Mom," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not argue with me." I said I was listening. "Craig and I have talked about it, and we've decided that it would be best for everyone if we limited contact going forward." Limited contact, like I was a toxic substance that needed to be contained. I asked what limited contact meant. I asked how much more limited it could possibly get, since we barely spoke as it was. And my daughter, my only child, the baby I had prayed for and loved and sacrificed everything for, said the words that shattered my world. She said, "It means you're no longer welcome in our lives. It means you're dead to us now." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I stood in my empty kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, and listened to my daughter explain that she was erasing me from existence. "Craig thinks it's the healthiest thing for our family," she said. "He says that having you around confuses the children, that they don't need a grandmother who's always trying to interfere." Interfere? When had I ever interfered? When had I ever done anything except love them from a distance, send presents I wasn't sure they received, leave voicemails that were never returned? "Melissa," I said. "Melissa, please, think about what you're doing." But she had already made up her mind. Or rather, Craig had made up her mind for her. "Goodbye, Mom," she said. "Please don't try to contact us again." And she hung up. I tried, of course. I called dozens of times, leaving messages that were never answered. I wrote letters that were returned unopened. I even drove to Chicago once, stood on their doorstep ringing the bell until Craig came out and threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. I saw Tyler's face in the window that day. He was 7 years old, and he was watching his grandmother being threatened by his father. He looked confused and scared, and when Craig saw him looking, he yanked the curtain closed. That was the last time I saw my grandson's face. I drove back to Ohio and fell apart. I stopped going to work. I stopped eating. I stopped caring whether I lived or died. My doctor put me on antidepressants. My friends tried to help. But what could they do? My daughter had cut me out of her life for no reason, and there was nothing anyone could do to fix it. The depression lasted for almost 2 years. I gained weight. I let the house fall into disrepair. I went through my savings, paying bills I couldn't afford on disability leave. I was 54 years old, and I had given up on everything. And then one day, something changed. I was sitting in Richard's old recliner, the one I hadn't been able to bring myself to throw away, watching some daytime talk show I wasn't really paying attention to. A woman was on the screen, talking about how she had lost her family in a tragedy and rebuilt her life from scratch. She talked about starting a business, about finding purpose, about refusing to let her grief define her. Something about her words penetrated the fog I'd been living in. I looked around at my empty house, at the dishes piled in the sink, at the mail stacked unopened on the counter. I looked at what I had become, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. I felt angry, not at Melissa, not at Craig, at myself, for letting them do this to me, for letting their rejection become my death sentence. I got up from that recliner, and I started to clean. I cleaned for 3 days straight, scrubbing every surface, throwing away everything that reminded me of the life I had lost. And when I was done, I called my supervisor at the hospital and told her I was coming back to work. But I didn't just go back to my old job. I went back with a plan. For years, I had been watching the hospital waste money on inefficient scheduling and outdated inventory systems. I had ideas about how to fix these problems, ideas I had never shared because nobody had asked. Now I started speaking up. I wrote proposals. I requested meetings with administrators. Most of them ignored me, but a few listened. One of those who listened was a healthcare consultant named Bernard, who was doing a review of the hospital's operations. He saw my proposals and was impressed. He asked if I had ever thought about consulting work myself. I was 56 years old. I had been a floor nurse for 30 years. The idea of becoming a consultant seemed absurd, but Bernard believed in me. He mentored me. He helped me get certified in healthcare administration. And when he started his own consulting firm 2 years later, he asked me to be his partner. I sold the house in Ohio. I moved to Florida. I threw myself into work with a passion I hadn't felt since I was young. Bernard and I built the company together, landing contracts with hospitals all over the Southeast. We developed software for inventory management that became industry standard. We trained administrators in efficiency techniques that saved millions of dollars. When Bernard retired 5 years ago, I bought out his share of the company. 6 months later, a major healthcare corporation made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I sold the company for more money than I had ever imagined possible. I was 62 years old, and I was a multimillionaire. I bought this condo. I traveled the world. I learned to play the piano I had always wanted. I made friends with other women my age, strong women who had built lives on their own terms. I discovered that happiness doesn't require the people who are supposed to love you. Sometimes, happiness requires leaving those people behind. And for 5 years, I lived in peace. I thought about Melissa sometimes, of course. I wondered about Tyler and Emma, who would be adults now. But the pain had faded to a dull ache, something I carried with me but no longer let define me. Until that morning when the doorbell rang. Now here they were, sitting on my expensive sofa, looking at me with expressions that mixed desperation with barely concealed greed. "Mom," Melissa said again. "Please, let me explain." I sat down in the armchair across from them, crossing my legs. "By all means," I said. "Explain. Explain why you told me I was dead to you. Explain why you let your husband cut me out of your children's lives. Explain why, after 15 years of silence, you suddenly want to talk." Melissa glanced at Craig. He nodded slightly, like he was giving her permission to speak. And that small gesture told me everything I needed to know. 15 years later, and he was still controlling her every move. "It was Craig's idea," Melissa said. "The whole thing. He convinced me that you were toxic, that you were trying to control our lives, that cutting you off was the only way for us to be happy." I looked at Craig. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, but he didn't deny it. "And you believed him," I said to Melissa. "You believed that your mother, who had never done anything but love you, was toxic." "You don't understand," Melissa said. "Craig was so persuasive. He had an answer for everything. Every time I wanted to call you, he would remind me of some imagined slight, some invented problem. He isolated me from everyone. My friends, my coworkers, you. I didn't even realize what was happening until it was too late." "So you were a victim," I said. "You were manipulated." "Yes," Melissa said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Mom, I was." I considered this. I had suspected, of course, over the years. I had read articles about coercive control, about how abusers isolate their victims from support systems. I had wondered if Melissa was trapped rather than complicit. But understanding doesn't erase 15 years. Understanding doesn't give me back Tyler's childhood or Emma's teenage years. Understanding doesn't heal the wounds that were inflicted on my heart. "Why now?" I asked. "Why, after 15 years, are you sitting in my living room? What changed?" Craig spoke up for the first time. His voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of a salesman. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, "I owe you an apology. I was young and foolish when I married Melissa. I had issues with control, issues that I've been working through in therapy. I realize now how wrong I was to come between you and your daughter. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me." The words were perfect. Too perfect. I didn't believe a single one of them. I asked again, "Why now?" Melissa and Craig exchanged another look. This time, I saw something pass between them. Fear. "We're in trouble, Mom," Melissa finally admitted. "Financial trouble. Craig lost his job 8 months ago, and we've been living off savings. But the savings are almost gone. We're about to lose our house." We didn't know where else to turn. There it was. The truth behind the tears and the apologies. They weren't here because they missed me. They weren't here because they wanted to reconcile. They were here because they needed money. "How much?" I asked. Craig leaned forward. $500,000, he said, "just to pay off the debts and get us back on our feet. With your resources, that's nothing. And we would pay you back, of course. With interest." I almost laughed. $500,000. From the woman they had told was dead to them. "What about my grandchildren?" I asked. "Where are Tyler and Emma in all this?" "They're adults now," Melissa said. "Tyler is 22, Emma is 20. They both live on their own." "Do they know you're here?" Melissa hesitated. "No," she admitted. "We haven't told them." "Why not?" Because they don't really remember you, Mom. They were so young when we stopped contact. We told them you had passed away." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not only had they erased me from their lives, but they had told my grandchildren that I was dead. They had stolen not just my present, but my future. Any chance I might have had to reconnect with Tyler and Emma when they grew up. "You told them I was dead," I said slowly. "You looked your children in the eyes and told them their grandmother was dead." Melissa couldn't meet my gaze. "It seemed easier," she whispered. "Easier for whom?" Silence. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean, at the endless blue that had brought me so much peace over the years. Behind me, I could hear Melissa crying softly. I could hear Craig shifting impatiently on the sofa. "Let me make sure I understand," I said without turning around. 15 years ago, you told me I was dead to you. You cut me out of your lives completely. You denied me any relationship with my grandchildren. You told those grandchildren that I had actually died. And now, when you need money, you track me down and ask me for $500,000. Is that correct? When you put it like that, Craig began. I spun around. How else should I put it? Tell me, Craig, how should I describe what you've done? What pretty words would make this situation acceptable? He had no answer. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the girl I had raised, the woman she had become. I saw the weakness in her, the way she had allowed this man to control her, the way she was still looking to him for guidance even now, and I felt something unexpected. I felt pity. "Melissa," I said, "I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to answer honestly. Can you do that?" She nodded. "In 15 years, did you ever try to contact me? Did you ever pick up the phone or write a letter or even think about reaching out?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Once," she finally said, "about 5 years ago. I called your old number, but it was disconnected. I didn't know how else to find you." "One time," I said. "In 15 years, you tried to reach me one time." "Craig wouldn't let me," she said. "He said it would just upset everyone, that it was better to leave the past in the past. And you believed him." I didn't know what else to believe. I nodded slowly. "Let me tell you what happened during those 15 years, I said. "Let me tell you about the depression that nearly killed me. Let me tell you about the 2 years I spent barely functioning, going through the motions of life because my daughter had cut out my heart. Let me tell you about the day I decided to stop letting your rejection destroy me." "Mom," Melissa started. "I'm not finished." I told them about Bernard, about the consulting firm, about the software and the contracts and the sale. I told them about the friends I had made, the places I had traveled, the life I had built from the ashes of the one they had burned down. "I did all of that without you," I said. "I became successful without you. I found happiness without you. You were not there for any of it, and you didn't want to be. You only want to be here now because you need something from me." Melissa was sobbing openly now. Craig's face had gone pale. "The answer is no," I said. "What?" Craig's voice was sharp. "No," I repeated. "I will not give you $500,000. I will not give you $500. I will not give you 5 cents. You made your choice 15 years ago, and now you get to live with the consequences." "You can't do this," Craig said, standing up. "After everything we've been through." "What you've been through?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You have no idea what I've been through. You have no idea what it's like to have your child tell you that you're dead to her. You have no idea what it's like to spend 15 years wondering what you did wrong, what terrible crime you committed to deserve being erased from your family's existence." Craig's face twisted with anger. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "You're sitting in a multi-million-dollar condo, and you won't help your own daughter? What kind of mother are you?" "The kind of mother you told was dead to you," I said quietly. "The kind of mother you told your children was actually dead. The kind of mother you threw away like garbage and only came back to when you needed something. That's what kind of mother I am." Craig looked like he wanted to say more, but Melissa put her hand on his arm. She stood up, her face red and swollen from crying. "Mom," she said, "I know I don't deserve it. I know I have no right to ask. But please, please help us. I'm begging you." I looked at her. My daughter, the child I had carried in my body, nursed at my breast, loved more than my own life. The woman who had broken my heart in ways I didn't think were possible. "I'm going to tell you something," I said, "and I want you to really hear it. I forgave you years ago. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that anger and resentment was killing me, so I let it go. I found peace with what happened between us, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that none of this ever happened. And forgiveness definitely doesn't mean giving you money." "So what do you want?" Melissa asked. "An apology? I'll apologize. I'll get on my knees right now and beg for your forgiveness. What I want," I said, "is for you to leave my home and never contact me again." Melissa looked like I had slapped her. "Mom, please!" I shook my head. "You told me I was dead to you, Melissa. I want you to consider me dead now. I want you to go back to your life and tell yourself that your mother passed away years ago. Because the mother who would have done anything for you, who would have given you anything you needed, who would have sacrificed her own happiness for yours, that mother did die. You killed her. And the woman standing in front of you now is someone different, someone stronger, someone who will not be used by the people who discarded her." Craig grabbed Melissa's arm. "Let's go," he said through gritted teeth. "We're wasting our time here." But Melissa didn't move. She stood there, staring at me, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of the daughter she used to be, before Craig, before the money, before the cruelty. A flicker of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who told me I was the best mommy in the whole world. And then it was gone. "Mom," she said, "what about Tyler and Emma? Don't you want to meet them? They're your grandchildren." "My grandchildren who think I'm dead," I said. "My grandchildren who have no idea who I am. You want to know if I want to meet them? Of course I do. I've spent 15 years dreaming about it, but I won't let you use them as bargaining chips. I won't let you dangle my grandchildren in front of me like a reward for giving you money." "I'm not," Melissa started. "Yes, you are," I interrupted. "That's exactly what you're doing, and the answer is still no." Craig tugged at Melissa's arm again. "She's made her decision," he said. "Let's go." This time, Melissa let him pull her toward the door. But she stopped at the threshold and turned back to look at me one more time. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said. "I'm so sorry for everything." "I know you are," I said. "But sometimes sorry isn't enough." I watched them walk to the elevator. I watched the doors close behind them. And then I went back to my window and looked out at the ocean, at the waves that kept rolling in no matter what storms raged around them. I stood there for a long time. That evening, I called my friend Patricia. I told her what had happened, the whole story, from the doorbell ringing to the moment they left. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she asked me how I felt. "I feel relieved," I said. I thought seeing her would break me. I thought all those old feelings would come rushing back, and I would fall apart. But I didn't. I stood my ground. I said no. "Good for you," Patricia said. "They didn't deserve a single cent. But part of me still feels guilty," I admitted. "What if they lose their house? What if they end up on the street?" "That's not your problem," Patricia said firmly. "They made their choices. They cut you off when they didn't need you, and now they want to use you when they do. That's not love. That's exploitation." She was right, of course. I knew she was right. But knowing something and feeling it are two different things. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Tyler, my grandson. I don't know how he found my address. Maybe Melissa told him. Maybe he tracked me down on his own. His letter was short. It said that his parents had told him everything, that he had learned I wasn't dead, that I was alive and living in Florida, and that I had refused to help when they needed me. He said he didn't understand how a grandmother could turn her back on her own family. He said he hoped I could live with myself. I read that letter 3 times. Each time, I felt the knife twist a little deeper. My own grandson, the baby I had held in my arms, believed I was the villain in this story. He didn't know about the 15 years of silence. He didn't know about being told I was dead to them. He didn't know any of it, because his parents had only told him their version. For a moment, I considered writing back. I considered explaining everything, telling Tyler the truth about what his parents had done. But what good would that do? It would force him to choose sides, to doubt everything he had been told about his family. It would cause more pain, more confusion, more damage. So, I didn't write back. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer with the few photographs I had managed to save of my grandchildren, and I made a decision. I would not let this define me. I had spent 15 years healing from what Melissa had done, and I would not let her break me again. I would not let Tyler's anger consume me. I would not let the guilt that Craig and Melissa were trying to place on my shoulders become my burden. I had earned this life. I had built it from nothing, from the ruins of the family that had abandoned me. And I would not give it up for people who only saw me as a source of money. 3 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Melissa and Craig had filed for bankruptcy. They lost the house. They moved into an apartment somewhere in the suburbs of Chicago. Craig eventually found another job, but it paid half what his old one did. Melissa went back to work for the first time in 20 years. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me felt sad. But mostly, I felt free. I'm 67 years old now. I wake up every morning in my beautiful condo, and I drink my coffee while watching the sunrise over the ocean. I have friends who love me for who I am, not for what I can give them. I have hobbies and interests, and a life that is full and rich and meaningful. I have peace. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Tyler and Emma. I wonder what kind of people they've become. I wonder if they'll ever learn the truth about why their grandmother wasn't in their lives. I wonder if, someday, they might reach out to me on their own, without their parents' influence, and give me a chance to tell my side of the story. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I've learned that some things are beyond our control. We can't make people love us. We can't make them see us for who we really are. All we can do is live our lives with integrity, make decisions we can stand behind, and let go of the things we cannot change. Melissa made her choice 15 years ago. She chose her husband over her mother. She chose silence over connection. She chose to tell her children I was dead rather than let them know me. And I made my choice too. I chose myself. I chose my own healing, my own growth, my own happiness. I chose to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. It wasn't easy. It isn't easy still, but every morning, when I watch those waves rolling in, I know that I made the right decision. Not the easy one, not the one that society says a mother should make, but the right one for me. Because sometimes, loving yourself means letting go of the people who refuse to love you back. Sometimes, the family you lose isn't the family you needed. Sometimes, the only way to find peace is to close the door on the past and walk bravely into a future of your own making. That's what I did. That's what I'm still doing. And if you're out there, listening to this story, and you see yourself in my words, I want you to know something. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not wrong for protecting yourself from people who hurt you, even if those people share your blood. The love of a parent is not a blank check that children can cash whenever they need something. It's not an obligation to accept abuse and neglect and abandonment in silence. You deserve better. You deserve people who show up for you not just when they need something, but every day. You deserve a family that loves you for who you are, not what you can provide. And if your biological family can't be that for you, then you have every right to build a new family. A chosen family. A family that will stand by you through thick and thin. I found that family. It took me years, and it nearly broke me, but I found it. And now, at 67, I can honestly say that I am happier than I have ever been. The ocean is beautiful this morning. The sun is warm on my face, and somewhere out there, my daughter is learning what it means to live with the consequences of her choices. I wish her well, truly. I hope she finds her way. I hope she escapes Craig's control someday and becomes the woman she was meant to be. I hope Tyler and Emma grow up to be good people who treat others with kindness and respect. But I will not sacrifice my peace for them. Not anymore, not ever again. My name is Hazel Patterson. I am 67 years old. I am a mother, a grandmother, a survivor, and a fighter. I have been abandoned, betrayed, erased, and resurrected. And I am finally, blessedly, at peace.